Hey there everybody, welcome to Tucktuk's Trinkets and Terrain. For this week's video, I actually stumbled upon some wasp nests, some abandoned wasp nests while I was out walking the dogs, and I thought I would make some giant wasp nests for my tabletop, because sometimes you just can't beat the real thing. I think they turned out pretty cool, so I'm going to show you what I did and how I did it, and I hope you enjoy. So this project started because I found these abandoned wasp nests outside while I was walking the dogs. So after separating them, I had two sort of working pieces, so I figured I would build two different nests. Just using some XPS foam to build the main structure, just roughly measuring the pieces to make sure that the nests were gonna fit. And then I wanted to make these sort of an overhanging cliff face sort of thing, so I ended up making a couple sort of pride rock shaped structures, just using my knife to carve away the foam and give it the shape. Hot wire knife would have been faster, but this gave some nice texture as I was carving the shapes that I wanted. I made sure to give what would be the stone sides a nice texture, using my blade to rip chunks out. I did that all over the three stone sides, leaving the top for some foliage and trees down the road. Here's the smaller of the two pieces. So you've also carved out a sort of insert where the two nests are going to be glued on. Just use some hot glue for this. The nests are pretty fragile. They're very thin paper consistency, so just being extra careful not to damage them too much. You can see I got some squished sections on the top of the larger one, but you can see here sort of the final structure shape that I'm going for. Now to sort of blend the nest and the rock together, just using some joint compound. This will give all the edges of the nest a nice firm, hard structure, so it'll be harder to damage or break. Plus this sort of naturally gives a stone texture that's easy to blend in with the foam. I also use this to hide the seams in between the pieces of foam. Once that was all dry, I had a little bit of weight issue with being top heavy, so you can see I glued some rocks in the base here to make sure it wasn't going to topple over. I then covered everything with some black paint and Mod Podge to protect all of the foam, as well as give it a nice base coat. I then set about painting everything. So for the stone sections, just base coated in a gray, and then for the top, I base coated with a brown. This will eventually get flocked. I just wanted a color underneath just in case some of the flocking falls off at some point. So there's a brown instead of a black. Once that was dry, I did a dry brush with a lighter gray, and then went back in with a tan or like a camel color and did a more sporadic dry brush. I then went around the nests themselves and did a really heavy dry brush with like an orange. I also went over the nests themselves with the orange to give them a little bit of a brighter pop. I even went down with the orange, sort of randomly spreading out from the nest. Not really for any reason, just trying to give some color variation and some interest, make the nests themselves the highlight of the piece, so the sort of lines draw your eye towards the nests. I hit everything with a black wash, and then once that was dry, went back in over the stone with an ivory dry brush to bring out all the highlights and details. And then with all the painting done, I started to add the plant life and vegetation. To start things off, I wanted to make some roots and vines sort of growing out around the nest. So I mixed up some PVA glue, some brown paint, a bit of water, and then some fine turf for a bit of texture to create this soaking mixture that I could soak this thin cotton string in. So I pulled these apart to make them a little more random and to give some various widths, and then just soaked it in my mixture here to create a bunch of roots that I could glue on to the underside of the cliff face here. I made a bunch of those in various lengths, and then while those were drying, I covered the top of the cliff faces with PVA glue, and I sprinkled on a bit of my mulch mixture. So this is just black tea with a little bit of that green fine turf for some color. So I sprinkled that on sort of randomly, and then I went back over with everything with some static grass. This mixture that I have here is kind of my catch-all, so whenever I use any sort of flocking, it just goes in this bucket and gets this nice mixture with varied textures and different things. So use that to cover the rest of the piece. And once everything was dry, I just used a toothpick to create some pilot holes for my roots, a little bit of PVA glue, and then just glued those on randomly all over the piece, focusing mostly on the underside here around the nests, but I did also glue some on the sides as well. And with those all glued in, I have these pre-made trees. They're super cheap. Frankly, they're just a lot easier to deal with than trying to make my own trees. So I just glued these on randomly over the top of the two pieces, added a bit of clump foliage for some bushes to finalize everything, and with that, these are complete. This was obviously a pretty lucky find. I think it would have been very difficult to make these wasp nests myself. It's probably possible, but I figured why not use what I find. I think these turned out really awesome. They're obviously really specific in what they can be used for, but even if I turn it around and face the wasp nest away from players, I think I can use these as sort of a nice hill encounter. Don't forget to subscribe and like the video if you did enjoy it. I would appreciate it. I do have an Instagram account where I post in-progress pictures and other things that I've got going on. I also have an Etsy shop where you can pick up dungeon tiles and terrain accessories to use in your tabletop games. Both of those links can be found in the description below. But more than anything, thank you so much for stopping by. We'll see you next time.